recent development within 100 years that you had that idea. So, uh, yeah. But I have no idea about the motives. You know what I mean? I don't know. You look at the way my life works and other lives work, people that I know, and a lot of the errors are not that you meant, you know. Right. And again, some of them were Romans that were uh, being drawn into the idea of Jesus. Good evening. And we are going to begin again. Why don't we pray? Then we'll work on our Hebrew letters. Is that a good idea? All right, let's. Father, here we are tonight, and we love you, and we want to learn. And we ask that you help our minds to be able to remember what we're learning, that we'll be able to read your word and get even more out of it in Yeshua's name. Amen. See? I prayed in Yeshua's name. Thank you very much. All right, now we're going to look at the letters that we learned, and then we're going to learn new ones. We begin with what letter? Aleph. Okay, and you remember the Aleph is the one that looks a little bit like an X in math. Okay, that's the Aleph. And the Aleph is a silent letter, but that doesn't mean that there's no sound when you have an Aleph. It means that there are, sometimes it's sometimes it's sometimes it's silent and you don't know. So, but we'll learn about that later. Get it? Okay, so we have Aleph and then Beit. Okay. By the way, Aleph is, in the original language, it was the head of an ox, and it means strength or leader. Okay? There's your Beit. It looks like that. So you draw it like this and down and around. If it has a dot in it, it makes a what? Ba. Okay? If it does not have a dot in it, it makes a va. Okay? And it means house or inn. Okay? Or tent. Okay? The idea is that originally Beit was a picture of a tent or a house. Okay, next is Gimel, which looks like that, which looks like somebody without arms or a head walking. And it originally was a foot, is the idea, and it means walk, move. Okay? And what is the sound that it makes? Gimel, G. G. Okay? Next, we learn Dalet, which looks like that. It's almost like a T, but, you know, the vertical line is over to your right. It's got to have that little dealio right there. If it doesn't have that, then it's another letter. Okay? Some of these letters, the little dealios on them are, you got to have them, or you're going to get it mixed up with another letter. Dalet makes what sound? Duh, duh, just like a D. And then one more we learned last week was that letter, hey. Okay? And it looks like almost like one of those hoops in the game with the balls where you put it through the hoops. Yeah. Except it doesn't have, it's not connected there. All right, we're going to learn one tonight that looks exactly like that, but it is connected there, and that's another letter. Okay? The letter hey makes a noise like an H. Huh. Just like hey. All right. New letter. Tonight is the letter that looks like that. Okay? It's either wa or vav. All right? There are people that are Hebrew scholars that believe it makes a wa noise and it's a wa. There are others that believe it makes a va noise and it's a vav. Okay? I go with vav. Why? I don't know.
I'll tell you why.
Why?
Because Sephardi and Ashkenaz are what's doing that. Sephardi is what's spoken in Israel today, and you, sir, are...
And it's vav. There you go. All right, now it's a very easy letter. Originally in the ancient language, it was a nail. See how you could get a nail out of that? And what is it that you do with a nail? You connect. Okay? Vav is a connector. All right? And in Exodus, when Moses is given the diagram in words of how to build the tabernacle, okay, the things that are used to nail the lines into the ground that are going to hold it up are vavs, because they're nails, okay? And in the Hebrew language, this is and. Okay? So whenever you're reading, you're going to have these vavs at the beginning of a word. Almost always that means and. Okay? Because it connects the idea before it to the word that you're looking at right now. Okay? Vav. Va. It's an easy one to make. Okay, the next letter looks a lot like a vav, okay, but to me it looks almost like an outhouse, like the roof of an outhouse. Okay, this is the letter zayin, zayin, and it makes a za, just like the letter z, zayin. Comes down like this, has the little hook there, and then down. So you make it like this. Okay? Zayin. Somebody else waiting online. Okay? So, new letters that you learned tonight are Vav and Zayin. The next letter looks a lot like the hey, but this is closed. All right? And the name of this letter is hate. Okay? Hate. And it makes the noise excuse me. So when you hear Hebrew and you hear him going it's that letter right there is what's doing it. Okay? The letter is hard. Hate is the name of that letter. Remember, hate all the way closed. All right? The next letter, all right, is a little bit, it's not easy for me, because I'm not an artist, to make this letter, but I make it like this, okay? It's a hate. All right? It looks a little bit like a Valentine's that's not all the way. All right? hate makes a t, just like T. Okay? And then the last letter we'll learn tonight is the easiest letter in Hebrew to write, which is Yod. Okay? It's a little bitty letter. Now, some people do Yod, some people do Yud. Either one is fine. All right? The noise that it makes, the sound that it makes is yeah. Okay? Yeah. Yod. Like the letter Y. Yod. Okay? Now, what I'd like to do now, you have them all written down on this. Okay, if you have one. If you don't, I have more. And I can make more. They're easy. I hit a button. All right? What I'd like to do, there's my cheat list. But what I want to do is I want to out loud go over all of these letters. Can we do that? Here we go. Aleph, Beit, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav, Zayin, Chet, Tet, Yod. Okay, and if you want music, put it to music. Okay? Aleph, Beit, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav, Zayin, Chet, Tet, Yod. Or something like that. Aleph, Beit, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav, Zayin, Chet, Tet, Yod, etc., etc., etc. Okay? Now, you can right now make words out of these letters. Okay? You can make words that are real words. You can make words that are not real words. All right? Either way, you learn how to read. And the goal is that you'll be able to read a Hebrew word out loud. So you'll be able to read the Hebrew Bible out loud. So you can go to Genesis, and you go to Genesis 1:1. You can go Bereshit, Bara, and you won't go it. You won't do it fast to begin with, unless maybe you will. James might. Bereshit, Bara, Elohim. You know. But the more you do that, the more you know what you're reading. Because you can begin sounding out the letters and the words and not even realize what words they are. But the more you hear them and the more you use them, the more you're going to know exactly what that word is. All right? So here we go all together. Aleph, Beit, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav, Zayin, Chet, Tet, Yod. Okay? Very good. Questions? Any questions? Yes. Jim.
Over on the ancient
Ancient
Semitic Hebrew,
Semitic Hebrew, yes?
in the picture column,
Yes.
what in the world is mattock?
Oh, that's a tool used in gardening and plowing. Okay, it's like a plow. Yep. In a different language, I guess. All right, are you ready to look at the readings? Okay. I know that you noticed my notes are not the notes that you had last year or the previous years. Because what I did in those years is I made one, and then the next year I added a little bit. All right? These are all new, like brand new. There may be some ideas that I've carried over, but most of it is new. And I am reading along with the Bible reading. I'm reading works of some rabbis, and I have other books that I'm adding and just looking at ideas and putting them in the notes, things that I think are worth reading and thinking about. Okay? All right. We left last week, Avraham getting a new name. Remember? Okay, his name was Avram. Now it's Avraham, and Sarah's name was Sarai, and now it's Sarah. And we learned that both of them got one of the gifts that they got was the letter Hey added into their names, which, by the way, is Yod Hey, Vav Hey. It's as if God gave each one of them one of his letters, all right, and added that into their name. And that isn't something that I invented. That's one of those rabbi things that I think is really neat. Okay? Now, this is the reading where Abraham is hanging out by the oaks of Mamre when 3 men walk up. Okay? Now, we know, because we're reading this, that it was Yehovah. Because right at the beginning, Yehovah appeared to Abraham. But you got to remember, that does not mean that Abraham knew right off that it was Yehovah. Okay? To Abraham, 3 men, strangers, are wandering up to where he is hanging out with his tents and his 300 men. So, don't get the idea in your mind that here's Abraham alone by a little tent with 1 camel and his wife in there. It wasn't like that at all. If you were coming up to where Abraham was, you would have been coming up to a small village. All right? There were a lot of people that lived with Abraham. But anyway, these 3 men come up, and says he raised his eyes and looked, and there in front of him stood 3 men. Now, notice what he does immediately. On seeing them, what did he do? He ran to meet them. Okay, where else in the Bible is there someone who runs to meet someone else? Yep. Yes. The boy that ran away, the prodigal. His dad ran to meet him. Okay? Somewhere else in Genesis that we'll read about in a couple of readings. No, in the next reading. I read about it today. If you're following along in your little readers' journals, you have the woman, Rebecca, okay, runs to water the camels of Abraham's servant. So what is up with all of this running? It means you are hospitable. It means you are willing to do whatever you need to do right now in order to make your visitors, your guests, your strangers feel like they're welcome. Okay? Which is what Abraham does. Not only does he run, but he prostrates on the ground. Now, that would lead a lot of us to believe that he knew it was God and he was worshiping. No, that's a greeting that's of that day and of that culture that you did when somebody whom you valued arrived. So Abraham is letting these men know that he values them, he wants to welcome them, he wants to be hospitable to them. And in that day, in that culture, that may be the number one morality, all right, of all morality, is you had to be hospitable to those that were visiting you. Okay, we've come a long way since that day, right? Quick, hide. Somebody's at the door, right? Okay, so a little bit opposite than how we are now. Okay, so then he bows down. He says, "My Lord," not like my Jesus Lord, but my Lord, Master, Sir, whatever. Sir, if I have found favor in your sight, don't leave. Let me send for some water so that you can wash your feet and then rest under the tree, and I will bring a piece of bread. Now that you've come to your servant, refresh yourself before going on. Very well, do what you've said. That's an example of love. That's an example of hospitality that is expected of those that are morally righteous. Okay? Now, we're going to compare that to what happens in Sodom and Gomorrah. All right? Because it's almost the opposite, even though Lot does his best to make them feel welcome. Lot lives in a land where that's not going to fly at all. Okay? So here's Abraham. We already know, because we've read the reading, that one, of these three is Yehovah, God. The other two are angels. We learned that later in the next chapter, in the beginning of the next chapter. All right? So we have God and angels, and Abraham doesn't know. So he is really entertaining angels unaware, right? So he's doing that right now. Now, that he's going to go get bread means he's going to get them a meal, which is what he does, because that's what it means. Break bread doesn't only mean eat bread. It means we're going to have a meal. So then they asked, where is Sarah, your wife? How did you know her name? That's what I would be asking. I'd be like, she's in there. She's in the tent. All right. One of the rabbis, Rashi, believes that Sarah was in the tent because she was a modest woman. That's a very rabbinical argument, that your wife be modest. Well, Sarah was modest. She stayed in the tent. But anyway, all right. Now, they get the message that she's going to have a baby. And they don't know about that. How's that going to work? We read that Abraham and Sarah were old, advanced in years. Sarah was past the age of childbearing. All right? There is a literal age where women are not able to do that anymore. And she was beyond that, all right? Which lets us know that whatever is going to happen, it's going to have to be a miracle. All right? There's no way that this is going to happen without God's intervention, which is basically the story of Israel, God's intervention over and over and over again, right? And maybe it's that way in your life. If you look back on it, God's intervention over and over and over again. Thanks be to God, right? Okay? So now they hear about what's going to happen, and in verse 12, Sarah laughed to herself. Kind of, right. And then she's thinking, I am old, and so is my Lord. Am I going to have pleasure again? Adonai said to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh and ask, am I really going to bear a child when I am so old? All right, now, I thought this was very interesting. I read this in Prager's book on Genesis, that when Yehovah reported Sarah's words to Abraham, which is what we just read, he left out the reference to Abraham being old. Okay? So earlier on, you hear they're both old. In verse 11, Abraham and Sarah were old. So we know that. But Sarah laughs and she says, I am old. Okay, well, what about Abraham? Abraham's just as old. All right? Men do not have an expiration. You're right. The reason I added this is I think it's interesting and a little bit humorous, okay, that the ancient rabbis considered this an example of permissible deviation from the truth. And in their view, it is allowable when done in order to spare a person gratuitous hurt or keep peace in the house. Well, honey, you didn't tell me yada, 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 yada. Well, you didn't ask. Okay, it's that kind of deal right there. So what is that? I don't know. It might be the rabbis making something up so that they don't get in trouble with their wives. Kind of sounds like that, doesn't it? All right. This is the permission. You know, in a way, I guess it's right. Just because something is true doesn't mean that it needs to exit your mouth. What was that, James? Yeah, how do I look in this dress, right? Okay. Same thing with men. We have that just as well in our own way, whatever that is. Okay, now let's get into the meat of this, because in the 17th verse, Yehovah is speaking to the other guys, i.e. the angels that are there, and he asks. That's amazing. You know, I'm going to ask what the angels think about this. Should I hide from Abraham what I'm about to do? So number one, why would he ask? I don't know. A second opinion. Do you think that Yehovah values others' ideas? Yes, he does. Often. That may be one of the reasons behind the language, let us make man in our image. Okay? The idea that everything in the Bible, everything that God does is not by demand. Some things are, but not everything. Some things are in counsel. Okay? So now he's asking, basically, should we allow Abraham into this council where we're going to make decisions? Should we do that? And interesting, there's not an answer. They don't give an answer. That's another interesting thing. But the next verse, he lets them, the angels, know why he wants to allow Abraham in this council. He says, "For I have made myself known to him, so that he will give orders to his children and to his household after him to keep the way of Adonai and to do what is right and just, so that Adonai may bring about for Abraham what he has promised him." So, what God promises Abraham is not without, there's an if in there. Okay? You might not read it in Genesis 12, where he says to Abraham, get out of your land, do this, do this, do this, because this is what I'm going to do. But in this verse right here, you get the idea that God will do and will bring about his promise as long as Abraham what? Yeah, keeps walking on the way. All right? Now, it says that he will give orders to his children and his household after him, that they would do what? Number one, keep. All right? That's the word shamar in Hebrew. Shamar. And it means watch over or preserve or guard or protect. All right? It's the idea of what a shepherd does with his sheep. Okay? He watches over them. He guards them. He builds a fence around them. Okay? That's shamar. So Abraham is going to shamar. What is he going to shamar? The way of Yehovah. Way is the word derek. All right? Derek. And that means a way, a road, a journey, a manner of life, or the way one lives. Okay? It's related to the verb, which means tread or trample. And it refers to a path that is worn by constant walking. You guys have known those? Anybody that's been in the woods or been to a fishing hole in Alaska knows there are those ways where others have walked. Okay, in the woods there are game trails that are ways that animals walk. You can watch the moose went that way, and they do it over and over and over again. So that's the idea with the way of Yehovah. It's a way to live and a way to walk. And how is Abram going to guard or keep this way of living? By doing what is right and just. Okay? And the words right are down there, right or righteous. I think the NAS translates it righteous or righteousness, which is more accurate than right. Okay? Which is the word zedekah, which can mean blameless, it can mean innocent, it can mean right, it can mean righteous, it means all of those. Okay? In the ancient letters, all right, the ones that are on here, in the ancient letters, if you look at the word for righteous, which is tzedekah, okay, it's a trail and a door and an arm and the horizon, meaning, when you put them together, the action of hiking on the trail towards the horizon or eternity. Okay? Jeff Benner, whom I mentioned last week from the Ancient Hebrew Research Center, says that one who is righteous is known as a tzaddik, okay? Is one who walks on the way of Yehovah so as not to get lost. And you read about that idea in all over the Bible, but in places like Deuteronomy. It will be righteousness for us if we are careful to obey all these mitzvot before Adonai our God, just as he ordered us to do. You can see it even more clearly in Psalm 1. Okay? How blessed is the man that does not walk in the way of the wicked on down the line, okay, but his delight is in the Torah of Adonai. Okay, so it has to do with walk. In Hebrew, everything about your life is about your walk. Everything about your relationship with Yehovah is about your walk. Okay? It's not about your belief. It's about your walk. That doesn't mean that belief doesn't matter. It just means that it's in our Greek ways, belief is elevated. Walk is put way down here. Like it doesn't really matter. Right? Your works don't matter in the Greek view. What matters is your belief. Do you believe right? Do you believe all the right omni words? If you believe all the right omni words, you're good to go. As long as you believe God is omniscient, God is omnipresent, Jesus is divine, and he died for you, then cool. Yes. That is written in the book that bears your name. Yes. Even the demons know that God is one. You believe that God is one. Great. The demons believe that. So you've elevated your belief now to the level of demons by believing in God. Demons believe in God. That's not the question. Is not whether you believe in God. The question is, what do you believe God expects of you, and are you doing it? Are you living that out in your life? Okay? Now, God says that Abraham will teach his children to do what is right and just. Just is the word mishpat. in Hebrew, and it means judgment or ruling or choose or make a decision. Okay? So when you read the word judgment in the Bible, almost always, because we're English speakers, we have the idea of something negative, maybe done by a mean old man in a robe that goes, guilty, judgment. That is not the number one meaning of mishpat. The number one meaning is, I'm out in the woods and I'm on a walk, and I notice there's a trail that goes that way and a trail that goes that way. And I need to know which one is the right one. So I get out my map, I look at the map, all right, and my map tells me that is the right one, and I begin to walk on it. I have made a judgment. Okay? It's a, Yeah. I don't want to go down the rabbit trail. I want to go down God's trail, right? Okay, that's the idea of that word, is making a decision in where you walk and how you walk. Okay? So Abraham is, not only is he one that is living that way, but he's going to teach his children to live that way. Why does that matter? Because he's the father of Israel, right? And if Israel's going to do what God calls her to do, which is be a light to the nations and lead the whole world to my way, all right, then they're going to have to walk on that way in order to be able to lead others to that way. Isn't that right? All right. Now, moving on to the next chapter here, or not the next chapter, the next idea where they begin to think about Sodom and Gomorrah. And Adonai said the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is so great and their sin so serious that I am going to get down there right now and see whether their deeds warrant the outcry that has reached me. Okay? Picture a principal in his office. A student comes running into the office, sticks his head in the door. The principal says, "You have no idea what's going on down the east hallway. Billy and Bobby are in a fight, and there's blood." And the principal gets up and says, "Well, I'm going to go down there and check this out and see if it really is that bad." Now, I know this blows up all of your ideas about God. Okay? Good. Because you don't need to be having your own ideas about all your theology right now. Right now, what you need to be doing is feeling and hearing what's going on in the story and not worrying about whether God is omni this or omni that or whatever. That's the idea of the narrative. The narrative is God goes, "I'm going to go down there and check this out." Okay? And he does. But he uses his angels to do it, doesn't he? Okay? He doesn't go there, but the guys go there. The angels go there in order to find out. All right? Now, Prager brought up 3 lessons from this verse, these verses. All right? Number 1 is there is a need to establish facts before passing judgment, and that even God does that. Okay? And we don't do that very well. We're really good at jumping the gun, making assumptions, believing we know why. I know why they did that, or I know why she did that, or he said that, or whatever. Rather than, nope, let's just hold on. Let's find out. I think about Yeshua with the woman caught in adultery, supposedly, and the guys that brought her there, and he wasn't like that with it. He was like, whoa, hold on a minute. All right, let's look at this, right? And how many witnesses do you need? 2 minimum. Well, you have 2 angels going into Sodom and Gomorrah, checking it out, so that a matter may be established by 2 or 3 witnesses. So that's one lesson. The second lesson is that God judges all people and does so according to one set of moral rules. And that this is a brand new idea in human history at the time of the writing of Genesis. Okay? That there's one set of rules for all humanity. Well, we learned that when we read about Noah, right? Because at the end of the Noah thing, it was, look, this is for everybody. Murder. No murder, right? Dana. Right. People ask and they're like, no, there was no rules before the 10 Commandments. It's like, well, there's a rule at the very beginning of the interaction with human beings. There's a rule. Rule number 1. What is the first command in the Bible? Be careful. Nope. Nope. What? Yes, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and rule and reign on the earth. That's the first command in the Bible. Okay? Why are you looking at me like that? Oh, sure it is. Don't eat? Well, no, I don't mean, I mean in the Bible. I don't mean of the 10 commandments. I mean the very first one in the Bible. Yep. Well, I think the idea is he gave the don't eat rule right before he made Eve. Hava. Yeah. So, anyway, you get the idea, okay? And then last, the lesson is that God is a moral being. Okay? The gods of the other ancient worlds were not, morality was low on their radar. Okay? As a matter of fact, in some of the ancient stories about the origin of the universe and human beings and all of that, the gods were fighting with one another, or they were having relations with one another. Okay? So, this is new in human history.
You find it interesting with
And then it went. Pfft.
well, Moses, he was about to destroy all the Israelites, and Moses is like, whoa, slow down. So we see Abraham doing the same thing.
Yep.
I didn't know it.
Yep. That's a really good question. Why didn't Noah do that? And here's what's really interesting about that. In Judaism, in rabbi language, all right, Abraham is greater than Noah. And the reason is that Noah obeyed. Abraham not only obeyed, but had a little argument with God, which we ought to learn through Abraham and Moses. We will, that it's all right to argue with God. Well, yes. Respectfully. Yeah, I would. Although I haven't always. I mean, sometimes in my life I've done this. Anybody else? I've been like mad at God. I've been like, yeah, like that. And it always ends up with me on my knees. I'll put it that way. Because I'm still here. But you get what I mean. So, anyway. Now, Abraham knows that his nephew Lot and his family are in Sodom. And it may be for that reason that he begins to have this bargaining. It looks like bargaining, but he's just laying it out there to Yehovah. But he begins very respectfully, it looks like in English. In Hebrew, it doesn't look that much, all right? he begins, Abraham approached, said to him, will you actually sweep away the righteous with the wicked? Abraham not only approaches Yehovah to join in the decision-making, but as one who knows God as a moral being, he's astounded at the possibility that God would behave unjustly toward anybody who was righteous. Now, you and I might look at it and ask, well, was Lot righteous? Was Lot righteous? I mean, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, Peter says he was, and Abraham apparently thinks that he was, even though he gave his daughters to the guys that wanted to rape the other guys, which is another big mess. All right? And he wanted to live down there in the first place. Right. It's like once, never mind. I wanted to live in Miami once. Till I lived there. So, here's the words. Far be it from you to do such a thing and kill the righteous along with the wicked, so that the righteous and the wicked are treated alike. Far be it from you. Shouldn't the judge of all the earth do what is just? And in Hebrew, far be it from you is kalila lacha, which means don't you dare, or how dare you. Okay? So this is Abraham getting up in God's grill with a statement that is right. It's a righteous statement. You know? Now, Abraham doesn't know that that's what God's going to do. I mean, he knows that he's going to look at it and judge it or whatever, but he doesn't know yet the outcome. He's about to give the numbers and go down in the numbers and everything, but he has this idea, for whatever reason, that God's just going to go to everybody there, and he cannot handle that idea that God would do that. Okay? So he goes on down with the numbers, and then the last number that he gets to is what? 10. All right? Why that number? Why not 5? Why not 1? I don't know. There's some ideas about that. One is that 10 is one of those numbers in Hebrew numerology that means completeness. Okay? So you have 10 words or commandments. So that's one option. The other option may be that's how many family members were in Lot's family. Okay? And we have the ones that we read about, but that doesn't mean there weren't other ones. Right? Okay? And in Judaism, to this day, a minyan, which is the number of men that you need in order to have certain religious services or whatever, must be 10, just like it was here in Genesis, and it's based on that. The minyan is based on that. Minyan. All right. There are words that we use, and we use them wrongly, but we don't know that we're using them wrongly, so we just keep using them. Minyan is one of those words. Okay, another one of those words is decimate. Okay, to most of us, decimate means totally destroy, but that isn't what it means. What it means is you line up 100 guys, and you get rid of 1/10 of them. So you go down the line, and every 10th one, and you go down the line, 10 more, that's decimate. It's a war word. See what you learn? Wow. Now you can go home and go, why do I care about that? All right, now, so the angels are here. Lot is at the gate. Lot sees them, and what does he do? He does exactly what Abraham did. He gets up, he goes to him, he bows down, all right? So he's ready to offer this hospitality to these angels. By the way, angel in Hebrew is the word malach, and it means a messenger, an ambassador, or an envoy. It doesn't it doesn't have to mean a heavenly messenger. Okay? Any messenger is a malach in Hebrew. All right? Just keep that in your mind. So, sometimes in the Bible it's translated angel, but sometimes in the Bible maybe it ought to be translated messenger. Because when you hear the word angel, instantly you're thinking heavenly, right? Okay? Prophet is another one of those words. No, that's not malach. Prophet is navi. Navi, yep. Okay. All right. Now, he's pressing them that they come into his house. The angels are like, no, we don't need to come in your house. We'll hang out here in the square. And Lot's like, no, that's not a good idea. Okay? You've never been in this neighborhood at night. You need to come into my house. All right? And finally, they agree, and he made a meal, and he baked matzah, which they ate. That's the first mention of matzah in the Bible, was with Lot. So, anyway. Then we read, but now, before they could go to bed, the men of the city surrounded the house, young and old, and everyone from every neighborhood of Sodom. They called Lot and said to him, where are the men who came to stay with you tonight? Bring them out to us. We want to have sex with them. Now, yes, that's wicked and horrible. But what makes it even more wicked and horrible is the beginning of the verse, where it says, young and old. Everyone. So you have this idea of there's young guys, children hanging around, and old men, and they're there, and they're all like, bring them out. All right? That's just, it's gross. All right? Violent and wicked. In the Talmud, we learn that the men of Sodom and their neighbors from Gomorrah were notorious for their wickedness toward others, especially strangers. Okay? So it's a little bit like a really bad deliverance movie to go to those areas if you don't know them, all right? In the Talmud, it says they had no consideration for the poor or the stranger, to whom they offered no hospitality, nor would they even sell him any food or water. And there are these two stories as examples out of the Talmud. One is that once when the men of Sodom discovered that a young girl had fed a starving beggar, they smeared honey all over her, placed her on the city wall so that she died from the stings of bees that were attracted to the honey. Because she was going to help him. In book Joshua. Yep. Another story says that there was a saying in Sodom, whoever will give bread to a poor person will be burnt at the stake. Okay? So they were wicked, bad. And it's not only, we make it out the homosexuality was the main error of their ways, but it wasn't. Okay? It was one among many things. And even though homosexual behavior is an abomination, according to the Bible, according to Torah, and in the New Testament, so it isn't like Jesus went, we're going to not worry about that one anymore. No, it's in there, in both of them. Even though all that is there, the main sin in Judaism is lack of hospitality. Okay? For them. All right? Now, even in Ezekiel, they are mentioned. Sodom is mentioned. The crimes of your sister Sodom were, and here they are, pride and gluttony. She and her daughters were careless and complacent, so that they did nothing to help the poor and needy. They were arrogant and committed disgusting acts before me, so that when I saw it, I swept them away. Okay? So the homosexuality was a result of the arrogance, which is interesting. Okay? The acts of homosexuality, the homosexual acts, they wanted to take the men and rape them, basically, is a result of arrogance. How is it a result of arrogance? Because that's what you do if there's no God. You're an animal. Without God and without His way of life, you are no longer, you're not in the image of God because there is no God to be in the image of. So what you are is you are arrogant in your belief that and your actions that, well, there's nobody over me. I can do whatever I want. Okay? Yeah, it is. I agree. Yeah. Because I always thought of it that way. And then I heard something or I read something, I was like, wow. Okay, it's not like things are not as innocent as we think they are, I guess. So, I guess if you read Romans 1, what happens in Romans 1 is human beings, they go down this downward spiral, and it ends up with homosexuality and losing your mind. And it says that men know God, and yet they suppress the knowledge of God so that they can go ahead and do what they want to do. That's arrogance, right? Okay, now, the angels being gracious and Yehovah being gracious to Lot got them out of there, but the wife looked back and became a column of salt. And in the Complete Jewish Study Bible, you read that they noted that her sin included a longing for Sodom and also a desire to see if her married daughters were really following her. For this hesitation, she became proverbial in generations later. Oh, look at that salt. You know what that is? That's Lot's wife. What did she do? Look back.
When I was in Israel, we went all the way to the end of the Dead Sea, and they had what they call the Mountain of Gomorrah, and they had the
Salt pillars.
that was shaped like a woman, but we don't understand that they put it in the cave. They do remove it, I think.
Right.
But I got a lump of salt from there.
Salt from Israel. You got a clump of it? Aye. No, I'm kidding. Dana, yes. Do I know what the real true Hebrew meaning of a pillar of salt is? No. Do you? A heap. Yeah, a heap. Yep. It's not a Roman column on a building. Right. Okay, now, at the end of this story, we have Lot's daughters living with their dad in a cave and realizing or recognizing or thinking, hey, we're not going to ever get a man, and we got to keep the name going and the family going, so we're going to get dad drunk and lay with him, and we'll get pregnant, and then we'll have babies, which they did, which were the Moabites and the Ammonites. And the Moabites and the Ammonites ended up being enemies of Israel. So, that's interesting, huh? Huh? Right. And Ruth was a Moabite. That's right. Yep. So, comes around, doesn't it? Very interesting. Okay, now, later when you're reading about Abraham and Abimelech, and Abraham again presents Sarah as his sister, and I'm using air quotes And the reason is, well, because at the end of it, Abraham's like, well, technically, she is my sister. And here's the way that she is, yada, 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 all right? But it's same idea. Abraham is worried that they're godless and they're gonna murder him and his wife and everything that he owns, okay? So he does what he does, and Abimelech finds out. And then at the end of it, by the way, when Abimelech took Sarah into his women or into his harem, all of the women were unable to have babies, right? They were barren because of that. And somehow he found out about it in a dream, and he went to Abraham and confronted him. And Abraham was like, look, dude, I didn't think there was any way you were going to let me live, and this is what I did. Anyway, we read in the 7th verse that God says this to Abimelech, therefore return the man's wife to him now. He is a prophet, and he will pray for you so that you will live. But if you don't return her, know that you will certainly die, you and all who belong to you. Okay? By the way, this is the first mention of a prophet in the Bible. So on a quiz, when you're asked, who is the first prophet in the Bible? The answer is Abraham. Okay? The word prophet is the word nabi, which means a spokesman, literally from a root word that means bear or bring forth. And the idea is that they are bringing forth God's words. Abraham Heschel, I know you've heard that name, the famous rabbi of the last 100 years, wrote that the prophet's essential task is to declare the word of God to the here and now. Not to the 100 years, not to the 1,000 years from now, not for the next however many generations, but right now, right here, this is the word of the Lord. And if you look back at Abraham, and you look at Elijah, and you look at Elisha, and you look at Samuel, all right, and Nathan, and all of those guys, it was all about, boom, right here, right now. So you get into the Isaiahs and the Jeremiahs, and there begin to be words about what's going to happen if you don't turn back. All right? And sometimes we take the idea of a prophet and we make them into more of a magician. Okay? And I think that's dangerous. Prophet is not a magician. They're not here to give everybody a word so that everybody will go, wow, that was amazing. You're amazing. You're awesome. How much? Give me your offering. No, that's not what it's about. Okay? The prophets warned and they comforted. And yes, they did have words that went way into the future, but that wasn't their main deal. Okay? Their main deal was here and now. And there are a lot of prophecies that are used in the New Testament that had already been fulfilled. But then they're used again in the New Testament. Isn't that weird? Like one example is Isaiah about, unto us a child is born, and the government will be on his shoulders. And we all know that Isaiah was writing about Jesus, right? No, he was writing about Hezekiah, who was a righteous king, and the government was on his shoulders. And there's much made about his birth, and yada, 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 right? Okay, so what does that mean? Well, do you remember when Skip Moen was here, and he used an illustration of the Hebrew view of history as like a wheel. Okay, so you have this nub on the wheel, and it goes around, and it hits the ground, and boom, there's history, and then it goes around again. And then 10 years later, 100 years later, it hits, boom, and there it is on the ground again. So that happens over and over again, so that you have Hezekiah as one fulfillment, and then later you have Yeshua as an even greater fulfillment of those words. You have things that David wrote about things that were going on in his day. And then Matthew uses David's words in writing about Yeshua. Right? So it's all right. It's legal, is what I'm getting at, to do that. They can have more than one fulfillment, is what I'm getting at. Yes, Dana. That wasn't what? What wasn't a covenant?
In other words, God said to Abraham, your people will be
Sand of the sea. Well, what was it when the animals were cut in half and they were split, and God walked in the middle of them and used the words, I am going to make a covenant with you, Abraham.
That's what I'm referring to. Okay.
15th chapter. Yep. Yes.
And there's no getting around it.
That's right. There's no getting around it. You could get around it by going, that was not in my Bible. But that's not a good way to do it. Okay. Now, Abraham prays to God, and God heals Avimelech and his wife and his slave girls so that they're able to have babies. All right? And that's the first mention of prayer in the Bible. It's right there when Abraham prays. Okay, now here's something that's interesting. In the beginning of 21, did you notice, I hope you did, where it says Adonai remembered Sarah as he had said, and Adonai did for Sarah what he had promised. Sarah conceived and bore Abraham a son in his old age at the very time God had said to him. Does anybody have another version of the Bible that you could read that verse out of? Genesis 21, verse 2 is what we're looking for. Verse 2. Out of a version that's not the complete Jewish Bible. Okay, what's it? How's it read?
Verse 2 for TLB says Sarah became pregnant and gave birth to a son for Abraham in his old age, at the appointment time that God had told him.
At the what? Ah, okay. So now that you know some Hebrew background and everything, you read the words appointed time, and you ought to go, is that Moed? And lo and behold, it is. Moed. What is a Moed? Passover, Shavuot, all of those. And lo and behold, the Jewish tradition is that Isaac was born on Passover. Okay? So when you read the words, at the appointed time, it doesn't only mean that when God wanted him born, but it literally means at the Moed. And that means that there were Moedim that were already going on before Exodus. Yes, question. Yes. Uh-huh. James read. Which one? Yeah, no, which version are you using? Uh-huh, TLV, yeah. Tree of Life version, right. God visited her. Uh-huh. Yes. And when did it happen? At the Moed. Yeah, that he had told Abraham. And I wonder if the word visit, which I don't know, I didn't look it up. I could look it up right now. I wonder what word that is in Hebrew. I have an idea of what word it is. That would be really interesting. So let me just look.
Do we know for sure that, because the Bible does a lot of telling us things that are later in existence and referring to them earlier. So what I'm trying to say is, the Moedim weren't established until later, yet this coincides with the establishment later.
Yes. Yes. I think that is very likely. Yes. It is, to think about. So the word visited that you brought up in the NAS, it's took note of, noticed, all right? And the Hebrew word is the word P-A-Q-A-D, all right? And we know that word, Q-A-D. God. All right? And it means watch over, all right? Or attend, or something like that. And that's the word that is in Exodus, where we find God's revelation of who he is to Moses. And you get down to the end of it, after he is gone, I am loving, I am gracious, I am compassionate, I am slow to anger, but I'm not going to leave the guilty unpunished. All right, however, I will be, and in most of our Bibles we have the word visit. I will be visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children and their children. All right, out of that we get this theological idea that God punishes, in a way, into the generations. Okay? But that is not what that word means. That's the word. Same word. It means watch over, attend. It's not a negative word at all. It's a good word. So, God visited her. God was watching over her to make certain that what he had promised would happen. So how do you know that God doesn't punish the next generation for the father's sin? Because it's against Torah. It's against the law. If God did that, he would be breaking his own law. It says children are not allowed to be punished for the father's iniquity. Who? They? You mean Israel? God did that? No. No. Not that God ever did that. God doesn't do that. Okay? God doesn't. God watches over the generation that is going to be harmed. But it isn't God doing the harm. Yeah, where I was just reading from Exodus 34. Oh, he may repeat it in Deuteronomy. Yes, it may be repeated. But what I'm getting at is it doesn't mean God is the one doing it. Okay? Any more than it means that if you disobey him, God is making you disobey him. Which, by the way, if you believe in Calvinism, that's what you believe. Ultimately, that all of your sins are ordained by God. Okay? Gar, yes?
Didn't Jesus take care of that at the cross?
Of what?
The curse, that's a curse, right?
No. No, it's not. It's her reality of life. It's the curse maybe in the garden, but it's not God. It has nothing to do with God. Okay? If I am evil, my son has a greater likelihood of having a bad life than if I am good, right? Okay? So if I am evil and then my son is having a bad life, God is not visiting my evil on my son. God isn't doing that. God's doing the opposite. God's wanting to limit the damage. So he does this, God, over him so that he can limit that damage. And he tries to speak to him, and he sends others to help him, and he tries to get him to walk the right way and all of that. So, yes. Yeah. And I mean, Yeshua did a lot on the cross, yes. But God has always been like that. God has never punished children for their fathers or mothers' sin. Because it's not his nature. It's not in him to do that. The devil does. The devil's the one that beats up on everybody because of what fathers and grandfathers and whatever has done. But so to me, that's really, really good news. Okay?
Yeah, think about what he talks about widowers and orphans as well. It isn't always a result of sin, but it's those that are receiving kind of a shafted life.
Yeah. And he loves those and wants to help those and commands that we help them, right? Yeah. That's right. Okay, let's move on a little bit. We got a little bit of time left here. I don't know if we'll get to the end, but okay, now Sarah notices about Ishmael and says to Abraham, throw out this slave woman and her boy, because they're not going to inherit with Isaac. Okay? So, unfortunately, what is Abram going to do? He's going to listen to his wife. Okay? And throws her out. But when she does, God visits Ishmael and the mother in the desert when they're about ready to die and says, hey, I'm here. Okay? I'm here to help you. And he's going to help them not only because he's loving and compassionate, but because he made a promise to Abraham. And Ishmael is one of Abraham's boys. So he's going to watch over him as well, even though Ishmael is going to end up, and his generations are going to end up deviating away, aren't they, from God. So, okay. Now, the last thing we're going to deal with is the Akedah, the binding of Isaac, which is one of the biggest readings, Bible readings done in Jewish life to this day. They read this more than any other area in the Bible, passage in the Bible, about Isaac and the sacrificing of Isaac, all right? So you guys all read it, and you've read it more than once. If you look at the notes that I gave you there, it's very interesting what I read in Prager, that virtually every ancient society about which we have data had human sacrifice, killing of human beings to propitiate their society's gods. Only if one understands this can one understand why God would test Abraham in this way. Are you, Abraham, willing to do for me what all other human beings are willing to do for their gods? Okay? So Abraham exhibits the willingness, and then God, nope. All right? And in that is letting Abraham and everybody else know that God prohibits human sacrifice.
What amazes me with that is that Isaac would let his father do it, because he was a grown man.
I know, right? He was a grown man. The fact that he would willingly do this and ask and say, yes, Father, which is one of the parallels we have with Yeshua and Isaac, is that you have a son willing to be put to death because his father wills it, you know?
So did Abraham teach
Ah. Well, there you go. Okay, that's a really good way to look at it. That Abraham, we already know that he was going to teach his children to walk in the way of God. So maybe Isaac knew enough and had enough faith in God that even he knew that it wasn't going to end up that way. Maybe. Father, yeah, where's the lamb? Yep. Which book and what element of it? Jacob? Oh, yeah, I didn't read that one yet. Yeah. Oh, back to this act. Well, it's very interesting that in Jewish life, in the Jewish view of all of this, what happens at the end of this is his wife, Sarah, basically they don't live together anymore at the end of this, because his wife finds out what he almost did, and she's like, I'm done with you and your religion and yada yada. She lives here and he lives there. So when she dies, he has to go to where she lives in order to visit. So whether or not any of that is true, we don't know. Okay? All of it is things that we're reading around it in that. Okay? Ray, your hand's up.
I had read in a book once that it has to do with the covenant because what you offer, the other person has to offer. The covenant is two-way.
Mm-hmm.
And because he was willing to offer his son, that enabled God to offer his son.
Well, that's interesting. I never heard that. Okay, so Ray's brought up that in a covenant, when one party is willing to offer up whatever, then the other party has to offer up whatever. And so that Abraham being willing to offer up Isaac then was God the Father being willing to offer up Yeshua. Which, well, he's in covenant with him. Yes. Yeah. He says at the beginning of it, then God did what? Tested Abraham. So that's what it is. Yeah. Yeah. You're right. I just thought that was interesting. But it does relate. It relates in this way. That here you have a son who looks as if he's willing to give his life, and you have Yeshua who's willing to give his life. Now, by the way, all of these break down a little bit. None of them are exact, all right? And you have to remember that Yeshua, even though he was executed, he gave up his life. And even used the words, nobody's going to take my life. I'm giving it. I am willingly giving my life. So, yep.
And this happened on the same mountain where Yeshua was.
Same mountain. Yep.
And he was 33. He was the same age.
Same age, and the other things I've written in the notes on 7 and 8 about these parallels that are there that are amazing. The one about on the third day. That one's mentioned in there. The one about the God will provide the lamb, and Yeshua is the Lamb of God. You know, all of that's amazing to me. And I of course, I am looking at it through the eyes of one who believes in Yeshua and follows him. I realize that a Jewish rabbi is not going to look at it that way. That doesn't mean that I can't learn something from them, right? Okay? But I'm looking at it through the eyes of Yeshua. And through those eyes, I'm not only finding God is testing Abram, but God is going to lead Abram in doing acts in the physical world that are a prophetic acts of what's going to happen with Yeshua. So it makes this picture of what happens with Yeshua. So when we go back and we read it, we can easily see Jesus in this easily, right? It's obvious to us. It's not obvious to a Jewish rabbi.
I see you have the Aleph Tav in 3 times in that one sentence.
Yep.
What do the Jews think that's there for?
Well, the Jews don't really believe in the Aleph Tav in that way, like we do. So, yep. And
Where does it say Abraham believed that he potentially could have raised?
Hebrews. It's in Hebrews. Yep. It says Abraham believed that God was able to raise him from the dead. That's right. It's not. Yes. That's right. Yes. Right. Right. Yeah. Nope. You're the only one. Said that Isaac had to have known if he was the one that was going to have the promise, then he had to have known that God was going to handle it. Otherwise, the promise would be null and void. Now, yes, of a young man with great faith in God and believing that, I believe that he would not have been nervous, which makes me feel like a wimp. Because when I think about it, I'd be like, what's going on? This was not on the menu. You know? Dad, what are you doing? Dad, I don't know. When he had the knife in the air, did he scream? I don't know. Stop now. Whoa. Don't do it. You mean God didn't know? He was testing. Well, why at the end then are the words the angel of the Lord, which means the Lord? Okay. Why were his words? Now I know that I can trust you. Now I know. I know. And I would be like, look, if you're omniscient, you already knew, so why are you putting me through this? Because if the words are accurate, now I know, then what it means is God didn't know what Abraham was going to do. He had an idea of what he was going to do, or you could take the easy way out and explain it away. Well, it was all for Abraham's sake. Except that's not what you read in the text. Okay? In the text, it looks. You're supposed to, when you read that, you're supposed to read that and go, what? God didn't know that? That's exactly what I think you're supposed to feel when you read that. Because then you're supposed to go, what does that mean? Does that mean that my free will has a lot more value, and maybe I have a lot more importance in my actions on earth than I believed that I did? You know? And if you're an Israelite and you're hearing this, you're an Israelite coming out of Egypt, in slavery in Egypt, coming out of bondage, and you're hearing all this about your background, and you're hearing these things about God so that you'll know him more, because the only God that you know are the gods of Egypt. And now you're learning about the God of the Bible, and you're learning that he's a lot more, that you're a lot more in his image than you believed that you were. So, yes. Did you have your hand up? No? Okay.
No, just a thought. And, yeah, no.
Go ahead. Say it. Oh. Okay, if there's nothing else, I'll let you guys go so you can get warm. Hit your buttons if you didn't already. If you don't have a button, I bless you in Yeshua's name. Good night, Zoom audience. Good night. I hope we'll see a lot of you Friday night. Sure.
Not really good enough to bother everyone else with, but
Oh, hey, wait, don't leave yet. Yes, thank you very much. I want to let you know tomorrow night is AMAC, okay? And you got an email that said we were going to watch a movie. We are not. Things are rearranged just like that. We are going to have a gentleman that you might know who's one of many that are leading an initiative to get rid of the ranked choice voting. And I believe that